If you act like al-Qaeda, you get treated like al-Qaeda. Don't be surprised when it happens. America is extremely polarized, to a point where people just follow their own ideological bubble. With any important topic, one extreme position is designated as the left position and the other extreme is defined as the right position. So even this old abortion topic is now being used again to polarize people, and some people on the left even called for storming the Supreme Court and to bring it down. The left tries to destroy the Second Amendment, and even attempting this would cause just chaos. In today's activism, nothing works without provocation. Everybody provokes everybody. And if you don't have any other ideas than just vote Democrat or vote Republican, you're never going to get what you want because it is a two-party cartel. So a lot of right-wingers, a lot of patriots, they're just trapped in this bubble. And they're just keep talking about the Q stuff and Marxism and the elders of Zion. The left now is into hardcore communism, and you can't talk sense into anybody anymore, because if you don't say what they want to hear, they get angry with you. Then you're the problem. It's gotten to this point where you can trick people easily, just using a bit of the old reverse psychology, as if you're talking to children. So if you want, for example, if you want the right wing to not get vaccinated against COVID, which makes sense because lots of right-wingers, lots of Republican voters, they're older, they're overweight, they have all kinds of high blood pressure, risk factors. If you want these people not to protect themselves with vaccines, you just say vaccines are pretty much a leftist position, and fighting the pandemic, is kind of this is leftist now. And immediately the right-wingers say, I don't want vaccines, I don't want to stop this pandemic. Even though it's basic biosecurity, it's basic biosafety. Biosecurity doesn't care about your party affiliation or your ideology. Beating COVID is not just about COVID. Did you know that? Because as long as the pandemic is going on, the country is vulnerable to another pandemic that may be launched by, let's say, North Korea or al-Qaeda or whatever group that has these capabilities. During COVID, you are especially vulnerable against a cyber pandemic, a cyber attack. So it's in everybody's interest to get this pandemic handled before there's another problem on top of this. If logic doesn't matter anymore, if people don't really communicate anymore, right? People really don't have discussions or debates anymore. They're not debating, they are agitating. And if nothing is solved anymore by communicating properly with each other, then the only thing left is violence, physical violence, and intelligence operations. And guess what? The government has all the experts for that. And the activists are bloody amateurs. We know the FBI and Homeland Security have created these huge mechanisms to track everybody and to find people that are troublemakers, and there's these databases of troublemakers, and then they are separated into different categories. Who is a prime troublemaker? Who is a lesser troublemaker? Pretty soon you will see the court proceedings against the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, and we will track how many times confidential sources are being quoted in those court proceedings. Now, that doesn't mean you can pin and blame every bit of radicalization and every bit of violence on the government. Now, especially in patriot circles these days, anything they don't like is being described as a fake. Be it Sandy Hook, be it the presidential election results of 2020, or the criminality of the Russian regime, which is the KGB. It's the very definition of individual narcissism and group narcissism when you just make up your own stuff in your own head, and that's then reality for you. following people who are incompetent and or mentally ill is a losing strategy. And it dawned on some people who went into the Capitol hoping that Trump would send the cavalry, that this was sort of a legal thing to do, to go in there and stop the transfer of power to Joe Biden, who is a tool of the DuPont clan, not the Chinese. Oh, you didn't check? You didn't look into the family history of the DuPonts? Well, you better do that now. Instead of learning from these mistakes, patriots double down on these mistakes. So now these Capitol Storm people, they are martyrs, and the Oath Keepers are martyrs, and Alex Jones is a martyr. And this needs to lead to more radicalization. So whatever happens, in whatever case, anything is being used to radicalize people. If something happens, patriots like, well, this is encouragement for more radicalization. If something bad happens to patriots, then they use it for more radicalization. If something's like so-so for the patriots, they use it for more radicalization. You act like al-Qaeda, you get treated like al-Qaeda. You still have these provisions, or certain provisions from the Patriot Act from the old Bush era. You still have parts and pieces of the Military Commissions Act in effect. This was not scrapped during Obama. This stuff was not really scrapped under Trump. And there's even new stuff. There's something called the Countering Foreign Propaganda and Disinformation Act. Guess what? If you do Russian propaganda and you get into bed with some Russian assets, you may get charged at some point. And this is an easy trap for you to fall in. If you turn into some sort of fascist, if you get in bed with Russian assets, then you literally get treated like al-Qaeda. You will be designated something of a stateless combatant, an enemy combatant. No protection for you. And one of the worst provocateurs these days is Alex Jones, who has now been sentenced to $50 million in compensation to the Sandy Hook parents. So he destroys whatever he touches. You marry this guy, your life will be hell. You work for this guy, that's nice for a few years and you make a lot of money, but then your life turns to hell. Heck, you get to be his lawyer. Your life may be ruined and you get humiliated in front of the whole world. I mean, everybody saw those clips around the world of Alex's phone data being given by accident to the other side's lawyer. And I remember the golden era of Infowars. I was a guest on the show a couple of times when Paul Joseph Watson was hosting. You know, I've worked with Watson and Aaron Dykes years ago, side by side, together, during a Bilderberg conference. Specifically, during the golden era of Infowars, during the Bush administration, the warnings were quite real. You had the Military Commissions Act, you had the Patriot Act, you had the specter of another weird terrorist attack, and when that happens, Bush and the Republicans were going to rule the country like dictators with all these emergency provisions, just one more terror attack away from doing whatever they want. And we saw the militarization of police. We saw this expansion of FEMA and the internment camps that could be used for any kinds of purpose, even counterinsurgency purposes. Even back then, people should have created new political parties, launched independent new politicians, challenging the two-party cartel. This is what people were supposed to do. This is what Infowars was supposed to do. Remember Jesse Ventura, who became successful in politics without the Republicans, without the Democrats? This is what we needed all over the United States. And to protect these new politicians and to protect these new political networks, you needed a clear understanding of intelligence and counterintelligence, which is something that is severely lacking in the population. even in Patriot circles, even in listeners and supporters of Alex Jones. People understand remarkably little about intelligence work because they haven't read any books or any proper books or too few books. They've just been listening to podcasts all the time. And that's why people bought into these ridiculous reports on Sandy Hook and ridiculous reports on COVID. We know how operations are really done. We've seen it with these MKUltra cases. CIA has a clandestine network of psychiatrists, and they have access to all these kinds of patients they can secretly experiment on. So this would be something fairly easy to do. You check the databases of your patients, you find the craziest kids in America, and then you destabilize them. It's an easy operation to do. I'm not saying this is what happened with Adam Lanza. I'm saying this is something you could have been looking into. And maybe you would find something like this, and that would be a sensation. But even if you don't find the big MKUltra sensation with Adam Lanza, you would still have really, really good reports about a system that completely failed and how you shouldn't punish legal gun owners for this crazy kid and what he's done. It's easy to do an MKUltra style operation. But on the other hand, as a professional intelligence operator, you would never even consider staging a full mass shooting. It's ridiculous. You have many, many better options. Same with COVID. You wouldn't stage and orchestrate a global fake pandemic where every doctor knows what's up, where every person in government knows what's up, an operation that any stupid idiot on the web could expose. No, you have many, many other options. You could launch a pandemic quietly. You just pick one of the new viruses you got and you launch it, and that's it. Nobody will ever find out, likely. Nobody will ever find out that you've done this. And then you have a virus in circulation that you cannot ignore, where you need masks and you need vaccines, and there's no way around it, whether in the US or in Europe or in Russia or in China. There are so many possibilities how this COVID pandemic could have started. It may have been some terrorist group. Somebody may have launched this virus specifically at the Wuhan meat market to make it look as if the Chinese caused this to happen by accident or on purpose or whatever. It'll be an easy operation. You just have your assets and you just spread it on the meat market in Wuhan, close to this lab, to blame the Chinese. That's one of many, many possibilities. Maybe it was a screw up in the lab. Kind of likely. We have lots of research on how flawed security is in those labs. How important dangerous work is being done in a level 2 lab or a level 3 lab. But no professional in his right mind would stage a hyper-complicated, phony, fake pandemic and orchestrate this in 150, 200 separate countries. People out there don't understand how intelligence works because people don't read books. They listen to these silly podcasts such as Alex Jones, who admitted on his own show that for 10, 15 years, he didn't read any significant amounts of books. He wasn't reading up on all the important things. His crew would print out stories they found on Drudge and hand Alex the stories, and he would rant about this content which his people got for free off of the web. And sometimes they would print out something or grab something from an obscure website, not even something like Zero Hedge, but Zero Hedge gets something from a very obscure website, and then Infowars takes that thing from Zero Hedge. And they don't really check it. They don't really vet it. They just run with it. So they have a sensation to present. And this is how this mess really happened with the Sandy Hook lawsuits and the defamation and the 50 million. It was gross incompetence. It was absolutely reckless. I mean, every job, every line of work has its risks. You know, if you're a contractor, you may fall from a roof, right? This is the risk. So you try to mitigate the risks. You don't party the night before. You don't get drunk at a work site. So you're less likely to fall. So if you're doing investigative reporting, if you claim to be the tip of the spear, if you claim to be the best, coolest, investigative platform there is, if you claim that, you need to fulfill certain basic standards. They failed miserably at basic standards. I mean, the last time Infowars did some of its own original, meaningful investigative reporting, the last time was in the year 2000, the Bohemian Grove infiltration. And after that, it's practically just finding stuff on the web, grabbing it for free, and then talking about it. It's a really cheap way of doing things. You grab content for free, you present it in your show, and you get paid for it. So for 20 years, Alex Jones didn't launch any new, meaningful political careers. For 20 years, he didn't really challenge the TwoParty Cartel. And for 20 years, he didn't really reveal any true secrets. But now that his company is crashing and burning, he claims to be the victim. He's the martyr. He was so great. He done such a great job for the people that the leftist world conspiracy wants to destroy him now. And this supposedly is a declaration of war against every patriot in America, right? So again, it's radicalizing the audience. And how much more can he radicalize his audience at this point? I mean, if you tell people that millions were going to die from these standard COVID vaccines are being used all over the world, there's this acute danger of millions of people dying, and next week there will be Armageddon, or in a month there will be Armageddon, the left is going to come for you, and there's going to be civil war and blah, 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 blah. How much more can you radicalize people? How much more can you insinuate that violence is the only option when the Republican Party is not as successful as you'd like it to be? During the Bush administration, Alex Jones warned of the two-party cartel. He warned about this left versus right paradigm where people fight among each other. And he warned about internment camps and these databases and exercises like Rex 84, where the government trained for counterinsurgency domestically. So this became sort of a staple for Alex Jones. And he had this Police State series, if you remember that. Police State, the movie 2000, and then Police State 2, The Takeover, Police State 3, Total Enslavement, I think the title was. And then Police State 4, always warning about these internment camps, right? But at some point during the Trump administration, Alex Jones changed his tune and said, wait, I've been wrong about these camps. They're actually a good thing. This was started during the Reagan administration, and it was meant to incarcerate the leftists. So Alex claimed he was tricked by this leftist propaganda against those camps. Really? So now Alex is the big provocateur. Now Alex is telling his audience that the elections were stolen. There's no chance anymore to get to solve things politically, basically. So if the left supposedly can steal a full election, what's the point of voting anymore? Or why would you accept any political proceedings? So the only thing left is violence now. That's the insinuation. That's the logical conclusion of this radical programming that Alex does. If you follow Alex Jones, you can end up in prison. Like his employees could end up in prison. Or some of his followers ended up in prison for doing something really stupid. As a listener, you may have isolated yourself from friends and family because they don't recognize who you are anymore. I mean, wouldn't it be a crazy irony if Alex Jones leads his audience into these FEMA camps? If he radicalizes them and they act like al-Qaeda, then they get treated like al-Qaeda. Maybe Jones just did all this because he's greedy and because he's mentally unstable and incompetent. Maybe he really believes everything he just creates in his own head at any given moment. Maybe it's just that, but the effect is the same on the followers. You may wake up one morning in a FEMA internment camp and ask yourself, how did I end up here? How did I get charged for actually colluding with Russians? And how did I get charged for, violence and terrorism? How did I end up here? Did I just fall for Alex Jones's greed because the more he radicalized people, the more money he made? Was it just that, or was it more? And I understand that among conspiracy buffs or patriots, there's a lot of distrust. There's a lot of trust problems. If you say something somebody doesn't like, you're the enemy. Every conspiracy influencer accuses all kinds of other conspiracy influencers of being part of a conspiracy. Sometimes the interests align, and they agree on things, and then they hype each other, but this is blind trust. This is not professional trust. And then things fall apart, and then they fight among each other and accuse each other. I understand that. So at this point, we don't know if Alex Jones had been recruited at some point by the FBI or Homeland Security for whatever reason. We don't know if that happened or if it really didn't happen. But we do have to speculate. We do have to consider the warning signs, and we do have to ask ourselves, is he worth the risk? Can't we find somebody else who is not mentally ill, who is not mentally unstable, who is not incompetent? Wouldn't it make sense to give money to somebody else? So why should we even accept that unnecessary risk with Alex Jones of him being crazy or an FBI asset? Of course, Alex Jones will always play the victim. So it's always somebody else who radicalizes people. It's always these other circles that won civil war. It's always somebody else who's polarizing the country and other people want to tear everything apart. Never him. No. He just tells people the elections were stolen and millions were gonna die from COVID. I mean, exactly when it became, legally troublesome to get in bed with the Russians, he promoted the Russian regime, which is nothing but the KGB without the Marxist-Leninist claptrap. It's not a Christian conservative wonderland over there. They're not really winning in Ukraine. This country is a disaster. And Alex always wants to cover his own butt. He always thinks he can stay under the legal radar, right? So he's not telling you to conspire with Russian agents, but he says Russia is now the spirit of 1776. And when all that blows up, he can defend himself by saying this was just rhetoric. He was just commenting on what other people were commenting. He was just asking questions. This is just regular radio talk. He wasn't really meaning anything concrete by that. So he shouldn't be getting in trouble. Just these follower idiots who actually did conspire with the Russians. So don't get fooled and don't act like al-Qaeda if you don't want to get treated like al-Qaeda.